Christene Marie, and I am so privileged you have joined me tonight. We are talking about spiritual intelligence, which, when I say that, it's for some of you who may not be familiar with an 𝐤𝐸𝐴𝐤, it could be very confusing around what is spiritual intelligence. And when I say the SQ, the spiritual intelligence, I'm really likening it and kind of putting it in the same category as intellectual intelligence. When we go to school in pre-K, in kindergarten, we are taught how to cultivate our mind. We're taught math, we're taught science, we're taught counting, we're taught how to read, how to write. And all of those practices are cultivating and kind of working out the muscles of our mental, intellectual capabilities. And so when I'm talking about spiritual intelligence, I'm talking about cultivating the muscles of effectively the spirit. And so when I talk about spirit, I think of it as kind of like the pathway to God, the pathway that every single one of us possesses, which is our spirit, to something bigger and greater and more miraculous and maybe even more mysterious than us. Because otherwise, so much of the time, we can find ourselves wondering what's our purpose and asking, why am I here? And the more we actually awaken our spirit, the more we awaken our pathway and channel to God, man, are we able to get some of those really hard questions in life answered. And for me, I've actually experienced asking some of those questions. I know for me, I've also seen other people ask those questions. So whether you have asked those questions yourself of what's my purpose? Why am I here? Why is there so much pain in this world? Why why am I in so much pain? Some of those questions can be asked really kind of from this place of our spirit is longing to know. And the reason why I'm talking about that kind of in the category of spirit is because there's something about it that's not tangible. When we're doing math, it's like hard skills. We're cultivating something that we're reading, and then we're translating into words, and we're then writing something, and it's very kind of transactional, very tactile. But when we're talking about meaning, there's something very existential and almost otherworldly to it, because we're almost looking up and out rather than down and applying ourselves to that moment with our mind. So each one of us, we've got different parts of our being that then can form into different intelligences. So the intellect, the intellectual intelligence, the IQ, the emotional intelligence, which is our emotions really live in our soul, and then spiritual intelligence. And that really is cultivating the ability to connect with God and to connect with something more meaningful in life than just you and me. Y'all, there's something so beautiful about starting to live for beyond just right here, right now, beyond ourselves even. I found that there's so much beauty and joy in serving and helping other people. There's something about seeing somebody walk out of the grocery store, and it's a young mother, and she's got her kids and she's got her groceries and she's struggling. And then when we go to help her carry the bags, man, we feel really good about that. So there's something about cultivating that part of us in the world where, man, we're not just living for ourselves, but we're living for something bigger and beyond us. And so much of our life is really supposed to be spent figuring out what that is. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Star Baby, I just saw you join. Sina'ad, y'all, I hope that tonight's conversation, as we talk about how do we have faith, how do we come to know God, I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my story, but also I'd love to hear some of yours of where have you come to experience faith? How have you come to know God? Because I think that all of us can really grow from each other. And so when I think about how have I come to have faith, there's so many different ways that we can come to experience faith. But even the fact that we're asking this question of, well, how do we come to have faith to begin with? And how do I know God? That really is such an important place to start, because y'all, we get what we want so much of the time. If I want to know God, if I want to experience and live life in a more deep and meaningful way, that's the first step. The definition of emotional intelligence is to become aware of, understand, and express one's own emotions. And then it's the ability to handle interpersonal relationships with wisdom and with empathy. I think of spiritual intelligence like that. We have to be aware of our spirit to begin with. We have to actually want to cultivate knowing God to begin with. Otherwise, if we're not actually being open to those kind of conversations, and we're not open to being curious about, well, who created us and why am I here and why was I created in the first place? Erlen, I just saw your note reading the Bible. Yes, exactly. Like there's different ways to experience and come to know God. And so, first and foremost, the question is, do we even want to in the first place? And the fact that we're here watching this and having this conversation, that's really exciting, because there's so many people who are not willing to settle for anything less than what they know is out there. Like for me, growing up, I just knew that there was something in me where I was like, man, there's more than just going out and playing, and there's more than doing and living for myself. Like I just knew that there was more meaning to be experienced. And I started experiencing more meaning the more I would serve other people, but then also when I would pray. And I would just ask these prayers really simply and be like, God, would you make me feel really loved? And I really remember that. I think I was 16 years old and I was sitting on the floor and I asked God to make me feel loved. And I just had this like sensation of being wrapped in a hug. And man, it felt like such a direct answer to prayer. And sometimes it would, happen right away. And other times it might take a little bit more persistence. But man, prayer is such a beautiful way to effectively say, all right, God, I'm willing. Will you speak to me? Will you meet me? Will you show yourself to me? Because God wants us to know him. He really does. He made us like him. And so when I think about another way that I came to know God, it was also me coming to know myself, which sounds wild. But man, the more I was interested about who I am, the more I actually came to know God because I was made in his image. So if I'm ignoring me and never paying any attention to me, never understanding why I respond the way I do, why I show up in the world the way that I do, I'm actually cutting myself off from a connection point and pathway to God. Knowing God, he's in me already, which is crazy to think about. I don't have to go search outward and out there to experience God. I don't have to go to church to know him. I can literally right here, right now, be in God's presence because he's in me. And y'all, that's where this is so hopeful that no matter where I am, no matter the time of day, no matter where I live, no matter who I'm with, I am always with the divine God. I am always, always, and never alone. I'm always with him. And so there's something about this companionship. There's something about, man, really believing that there is meaning, believing that there is easy access to God. What that does is that if I believe that, then I'm going to behave like that. So if I believe that I have easy access to God, when I start feeling alone, I'm going to pursue something different than if I didn't believe that he was there. So for example, if I didn't believe that God really was here with me right now, when I start feeling lonely, I'm going to actually keep leaning into that feeling of loneliness rather than saying, hey, wait a second. I actually know in my mind that I'm not alone. And I need to kind of remember that in my soul, because this is the thing about connecting the intellect, the spirit, and the soul. It all kind of like meets at this crossroad in this intersection. That's where when we talk about spiritual intelligence, there's something about memorizing truth, memorizing the aspects of who God is and the aspects of, who I am in relation to God that are really, really important. It's like we all know the ABCs. We all know these old little nursery rhyme songs like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Everyone knows that song. There's aspects about memorizing truth about God that is so helpful, so that when I start feeling alone, when I start actually thinking about things that are negative or dark or sad, I have truth kind of running in the back of my mind that can keep me on the right track and reminding me of who I am and whose I am. So when we think about, well, how do I have faith? Do I even want to have it in the first place? Do I even want to know God? If the answer is yes, then pray, ask God to reveal himself, but then also third, go inward. Go be like, oh man, how was I made? Who am I? Because as we come to know ourselves, we come to know him. And then also, y'all, with with this aspect of remembering truth and kind of reminding ourselves of what's true, take one or two different either scripture verses. There's a couple ones that I really, really love. Psalm 16:11 comes to mind. It says, "The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Indeed, I have a beautiful inheritance." And what that means for me is that if I get sick, if I don't have a ton of money in the bank, if I am not able to go to an event, all of that is like, okay, the boundary lines, I have faith that the boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Like, I exist in a beautiful place inside this little haven and this little boundary, and I have a beautiful existence here in this place with God. So that's a verse that I will speak to myself and remind myself, this is what's true. And there's another verse that says, "Even if I go to the depths of the sea, you are there." So if I'm feeling alone, remembering that scripture, all right, I'm going to call that to mind and say, all right, this is true. Yes, I have emotionally in my soul, I have this feeling of loneliness, but spiritually, I have this truth that I know at the end of the day, I'm never alone. So, y'all, that's where the cultivation and kind of like working out the muscles, like think of it as going to the gym. We go to the gym intellectually in school, we go to the gym intellectually at work. We need to be going to the gym spiritually by way of reading the Bible, like Erlen, you said here. And we can also do that through prayer. I also do that, and also do kind of going to the gym, working out my emotions by way of doing some of I call it vertical alignment. And actually, if you go to verticalalignment.com, I've got 21 days. It's totally free. Just put in your email address, and starting tomorrow, you'll get 21 days of alignments, which is effectively like little truths and scriptures and things that are super meaningful for me that help me every single day to align myself emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, because otherwise I'm going to live on autopilot. So when we think of how do I have faith? How do I know God? Well, there's a lot of default behaviors and default beliefs about faith, about God, that we actually need to proactively move away from. So, yes, all of those different ways that I was talking about earlier of how we can have faith and how we can know God, do you even want to in the first place? Prayer, Bible reading, coming to know ourselves, because we're a reflection of God. Every single one of those is really important. But we also need to identify, what are the old patterns? What are the old behaviors? What are the old beliefs that were handed to me? Because sometimes things might look like faith, but they're actually inherited by somebody else. Sometimes they were also modeled for us. For so many of us, apart from being intentional to pursue faith for ourselves, we're actually going to be pursuing that of our parents, that of our pastors or priests or somebody else that was handed to us and said, hey, this is spirituality, this is religion, this is what relationship with God looks like. But if you've never experienced it for yourself, that's really where it's our responsibility now as adults, where we get to say, okay, let me look back throughout my childhood. When did I experience God? When did I feel Him emotionally? Did I sense spiritually like I really was hearing the truth? Because we all know when we're hearing something that's true and when we are hearing something that's not true. And we can look back in our childhood and say, all right, like that moment, that maybe that time that I went to church that day, that was really meaningful. Maybe that time I went to church, that just didn't feel very right. Maybe this time, I prayed and I felt God. Like when I prayed and asked God to make me feel loved, I felt like I got a hug. Y'all, there's points in all of our lives. Somebody in the Middle East said that he had a vision of Christ. Someone in, Asia had a whole experience. And y'all, it's just wild how many people in different parts of the world, different countries, different time zones, it doesn't really matter what even the religion is. If we want to know God, He will be faithful to reveal Himself because He's in us. So if we have the desire to begin with, man, if we go inward, we will come to know God if we have the desire, if we're willing to. And then the last thing I'll say, for all of us asking this question of how do I have faith? How do I want to know God? Or how do I know God? Y'all, if we're vulnerable, if we are honest with ourselves, if we pour out what's inside of us. There's actually a verse that says, she poured out her soul before the Lord. She poured out her heart. There's this biblical story of a woman who really, really wanted a baby. And she was really being bullied and really treated meanly. And then she finally just couldn't take it any longer. And she went to church back in the day. And it says she poured out her soul before the Lord, and then he heard her prayer. And y'all, I've experienced this so many times where I've been thinking about something I want, or I've been upset about something, but it was only when I really truly was so honest and allowed myself to cry or grieve or really get to the root of whatever it was that I really even wanted in the first place. That's when I had breakthrough. That's when I actually got the answer. That's when I actually encountered and experienced God. Y'all, I don't want to just think of God intellectually. I want to know him and experience him with every faculty of my being. So if I go sit in a church building and they're singing a song and people are just standing there, they look bored, they're on their phones, that's not the God that I know. I want God who is alive and active and powerful. I want people who have experienced, who know God and are confident in the way they live, in the way that they show up, because they know who they are and they know whose they are. Because, y'all, if we know who we are, who God created us to be, man, it's like we're standing on the shoulders of giants. We're so confident. We're so powerful because the God of the universe made us. And there is no reason for us to be fearful. There's a verse that says, the righteous are as bold as a lion. The more we stand on the shoulders of who God says we are, our identity in him, man, that is going to be so powerful. We can move. That's why it says you can have the faith to move mountains. But y'all, if we are not doing the work to open ourselves up and be exposed before God and say, okay, here's who I am. Here's the truth. Here's how I feel. Here's what I think. Because again, thinking is from the intellect. Emotions and feelings are from the soul. We have to be honest about all of it and not try to hide these parts of us from God. So often I would go to church and engage spiritually, religiously, but I didn't realize that I actually needed to present my soul to him, all of my emotions, and I also needed to present all of my thoughts to him. We need to bring ourselves holistically. When we consider, how do I have faith? It's every part of us. How do we know God? Well, we get to know him by coming to know ourselves too, which is just crazy and so cool that God literally lives within us. We take him everywhere we go. That's why when we encounter some people, we walk away and we're like, wow, that was powerful. I don't know what was in that person. I don't know what they're on. And it's because the living God is active in them. And y'all, you have this power. Every single one of us has this incredible power. And what's crazy about it is that it's not really talked about very often at church. It's not talked about very often in a lot of these religious settings. Because, man, imagine what would happen if every single one of us had God alive within us. The thing about Jesus, who we're going to be celebrating his birth in, I think, 11 days, the thing about Jesus coming to earth is that he was the model. He was the example for how every single one of us gets to live. We actually get to live like Jesus. We have that same power that was in Jesus is in us. Jesus Christ, well, Christ is in us. And that's what's amazing. They say in the Bible, I don't know which verse it is. It might be Colossians or Galatians. I don't know. Christ, the hope of glory. Y'all, each one of us has a glorious hope. And glory really is it. There have been times where I've been sitting in a hotel room completely alone. There have been times where I've been in various parts of the world and I feel like it is a glorious hotel room. Like I'm encountering the glory of God because he's in me and he'll go wherever I go, no matter how long it's been since I stepped into a church building, no matter how long it's been since I read my Bible. Because the thing is that if Christ is not alive in us, if we are not asking God to reveal himself to us and being open to what God may say, otherwise the Bible is just words on a page. It is the revelation of God through spirit that makes the Bible come alive. Otherwise, it's literally it's just a book. But if we are seeking God and saying, God, will you tell me? Will you show me? Reveal yourself to me through the pages on this book. And here's the thing that's so cool is that he reveals himself through those pages in the Bible, but he reveals himself through pages of multiple books. He can reveal himself through conversations like this, the one we're having tonight. Every single moment of our lives is an opportunity for us to activate and awaken. And it's like turning on the light switch of Christ. But here's the thing, when we think of who Christ is, it's truth, love, and love casts out fear. So if we're holding tightly onto any kind of fear in our life and we don't want to let that go, it's going to be well, it kind of is, right? It's kind of impossible for Christ to really occupy all of us. So there is an element of surrendering and letting go of fear. And when we think about the truth side, there's an element of letting go of what we've been hiding. Maybe we haven't really been honest about our feelings or emotions. I know for me, I viewed emotions and feelings as weakness for a really, really long time. And so here's the thing, we have to know what we're letting go of in the first place. So if we haven't done the work to actually go inward and say, oh my gosh, I've got a lot of anger. Oh my gosh, I've got a lot of hatred. Oh my gosh, I've got a lot of resentment. Well, then we can't let go of it. So we actually have to become acquainted with the darkness to then release it and let go of it. And then the light can permeate. So with that, I would love to hear from you. What are the practices? What are the ways that you have come to have faith and come to know God? And please feel free to send me a message. I really, really would love to hear from you. But in the meantime, thank you so